I remember the day the news reached me as if it were carved into my memory with sharp edges I couldn't smooth. I had been scrolling through my phone, sipping tea on my balcony, enjoying the calm of a late Sunday morning, when my brother's message appeared. Just a few words, clipped and almost casual. The house is sold. Done. For a moment, I didn't understand. My childhood home, our home, the place where every corner held memories of laughter, arguments, scraped knees, birthday candles, and late-night talks with Dad about everything and nothing, sold? And not a word to me, not even a hint that this was being considered. I felt my chest tighten, the warmth in my hands fading as I reread the message. I called him immediately. "You're not part of this decision," he said, his tone final, almost rehearsed. It wasn't a question. There was no room for discussion, no invitation to share my voice or my memories or my opinions. Just a line drawn, separating me from a life I had lived alongside him, alongside our parents. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand some recognition of what he had done, but somehow, all I could manage was a trembling, "Okay." After the call ended, I sat in silence for hours, staring at the walls of my apartment, imagining our old living room, the faded floral wallpaper in the corner where Mom had tried to patch a tear with nothing but hope, the squeaky wooden floorboards that had always creaked under our footsteps, the window that framed the oak tree we'd climbed together as children. All of it sold, all of it gone, as if my existence in that home hadn't mattered at all. I tried to understand it. Maybe it wasn't malicious, maybe it was just thoughtlessness, a family moving on, a decision made in haste. But even that thought hurt more than anger. Because being excluded, the feeling of being dismissed, of being invisible when it mattered most, was a quiet kind of betrayal, one that seeped into your bones and made you question everything. For the next few days, I kept to myself. I didn't answer my brother's follow-up messages. I didn't call my parents. I wandered through my own apartment, touching objects that were mine alone, small anchors in a world that suddenly felt unmoored. I allowed myself to cry, not in loud, dramatic bursts, but quietly, so no one could see. Each tear carried fragments of memories, laughter echoing faintly in my mind, mingling with the sting of being ignored. Yet amid the pain, a strange clarity began to form. If my voice hadn't mattered in this moment, perhaps it was time I learned to measure my worth elsewhere. If my presence wasn't needed to preserve what we had built together, maybe I needed to preserve myself first. I didn't call or confront anyone that week. I didn't even mention the sale to my friends. Instead, I revisited my old photo albums, one by one, tracing the lines of familiar faces, reliving moments that were mine, even if the walls that held them no longer were. And slowly, I felt a quiet determination awaken in me, not the fiery, vengeful kind, but a gentle, resolute strength. I couldn't change what had been done, but I could choose how I responded. I could protect my own peace. The house was gone, yes, but the memories remained. And in those memories, I realized something important: my voice mattered. Even if they had tried to silence it, even if they had moved on without me, I still had the right to speak, to decide, to exist with dignity. I didn't know yet how or when I would respond, but I felt the first stirrings of patience, the first taste of calm wisdom. And for the first time since the news hit me, I felt a sense of quiet power, one that didn't need their permission to exist. After that first wave of shock and disbelief, I retreated into silence. I didn't answer my brother's texts. I didn't call my parents. For a while, I couldn't even bring myself to think about the house without my chest tightening painfully. I had loved that home, not just for the walls and the furniture, but for the memories stitched into every corner. It was where I had grown up, where laughter and arguments and secrets had shaped me. And they had sold it without even telling me. The days passed, each one stretching longer than the last, and I learned something essential about pain: it isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, insistent, like a pulse in your veins that refuses to be ignored. I felt invisible, dismissed, and yet strangely alert. I began observing, not in a nosy or petty way, but in the way a wounded animal watches the world, carefully and cautiously, noticing every movement, every tone, every small sign. It was then I started noticing cracks in the family's facade of composure. My parents seemed a little more anxious than usual. My brother's confident messages occasionally slipped into irritation when small issues arose, as if the weight of the house sale had finally begun to press on him. I didn't say anything. I just watched. Quietly. Carefully. The first time I allowed myself to reach out, it was under the guise of normalcy. I asked my mother a neutral question about her week, something trivial, and noticed her hesitation. Then my father made a casual remark about the house's new owners, his voice carrying a subtle tremor. For a fleeting second, the walls they had built between us seemed to falter. And I realized, they had acted quickly, almost arrogantly, believing everything would go smoothly, but life rarely rewards secrecy and haste. I found solace in my own routine, in small, personal rituals that grounded me. Morning walks, tea on the balcony, journaling late into the night. I replayed the memories of that house in my mind, the smell of Mom's baking on rainy days, the sound of Dad's laughter as he chased us around the living room, the sun spilling through the kitchen window on lazy summer mornings. I let myself grieve, not with anger or shouts, but with quiet acknowledgement. Every memory was mine, and no sale could erase that. Meanwhile, the family continued as if nothing had happened, though the cracks widened. Phone calls went unanswered, minor disagreements escalated, and I could see their frustration slowly mounting. I didn't interfere. I had learned that silence could speak louder than words, that patience could reveal truths faster than confrontation. And, secretly, I felt a strange comfort in knowing that time often exposes what people try to hide. One evening, my brother called. His voice was curt, clipped, and impatient, an attempt at casual conversation, but I detected the undercurrent of unease. He mentioned a problem with the new owners, a missed payment, and an unexpected dispute. My heart tightened, not from excitement or vindication, but from a quiet awareness that the story wasn't over. Their confidence in excluding me had not produced the seamless success they imagined. Life had a way of correcting itself, even if only subtly. That night, I sat on my balcony and let the breeze wash over me. I didn't feel triumphant, I didn't feel vengeful. I felt calm. I felt ready. Silence had taught me its own lessons, patience, observation, and the quiet power of restraint. I understood, finally, that I didn't need to shout to assert myself. I only needed to wait, to watch, and to preserve my dignity. And as the city lights flickered below, I whispered to myself, they may have sold the house, but they haven't sold my voice. They may have ignored me, but they haven't erased me. And when the time comes, they will see that I am not to be overlooked. It wasn't immediate, life rarely delivers consequences in neat, predictable packages, but eventually, the cracks became impossible to ignore. Months had passed since the house was sold, and I continued my quiet life, working, journaling, and taking long walks through neighborhoods that reminded me of home. I rarely thought about my family's decisions anymore, not with anger, but with a calm understanding that some things are out of your control. And then, the first signs of trouble began to surface. A call from my mother, shaky and hesitant. She avoided the usual pleasantries, speaking instead about missed payments, unexpected repair costs, and a growing dispute with the new owners. She didn't ask me for advice directly, but I could hear the desperation lurking beneath her carefully measured words. My father had been trying to manage it all himself, but the more they tried to patch things, the worse it seemed to become. I listened quietly, letting her speak without interruption. I didn't offer solutions immediately. Part of me wanted to, yes, but another part, the part that had learned the value of patience, recognized that this was the natural unfolding of choices made without thought for consequences. They had acted quickly, confidently, believing their secrecy would shield them from any fallout. Life had other plans. A few days later, my brother called. His voice trembled slightly, betraying the confidence he had tried so hard to maintain. He didn't yell or accuse, he simply explained that the sale had created legal complications they hadn't anticipated. Contractors were demanding payment, the new owners were threatening to back out, and creditors had begun calling. All the careful plans, all the bravado about excluding me, were collapsing piece by piece. For the first time, I felt something shift inside me, not satisfaction, exactly, but a quiet recognition that time had delivered its own lessons. I had grieved the house. I had mourned the loss of my voice and my place in the family. And yet now, observing their panic, I realized that wisdom and patience were far more powerful than anger or confrontation. They reached out, finally, directly, desperate for my guidance and my intervention. Their calls came in waves, my mother's voice trembling, my father's words hesitant, my brother's frustration thinly veiled beneath urgency. I didn't answer right away. I let the phone sit beside me, feeling the calm strength I had cultivated over months settle into my chest. When I finally picked up, I spoke softly, measured, and carefully. Not with anger, not with accusations, but with a clarity that left no room for misunderstanding. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, my tone gentle but firm. And as I listened to their requests, I realized something profound. Their panic and desperation were not about the house, or the money, or even the property, they were about respect. They had underestimated me, overlooked me, and assumed I would remain silent forever. I took a deep breath and said only what was necessary. I offered guidance where it was required, but I refused to take on blame that was not mine. I refused to let their hurried choices dictate my emotions. They had created the chaos, I simply navigated it with calm, intelligence, and quiet authority. By the time the conversation ended, the tension in the air had shifted. Their desperation had not vanished entirely, but they now recognized the consequences of acting without consideration, of making choices that silenced the very people they claimed to love. And I, standing quietly on the other side of betrayal, felt a deep sense of inner strength and clarity. That night, I sat on my balcony, the city lights flickering like tiny reminders that life continues, with or without us. I realized something important: pain can teach patience, silence can teach strength, and watching the natural consequences of others' actions can teach wisdom. The house was gone. The betrayal had been real. But in my calm, measured response, I had reclaimed what truly mattered: my dignity, my voice, and my emotional strength. The phone rang that evening, its insistent buzz echoing through my small apartment. I recognized the number immediately. It was my brother. I let it ring for a few moments, watching the city lights flicker through the window, feeling the calm steadiness I had cultivated over months. When I finally answered, I didn't speak in panic or accusation. I didn't yell. I just said, softly, "Hello." His voice was strained, almost unrecognizable. Gone was the casual confidence he had wielded when excluding me from decisions. Gone was the arrogance that had made him so certain he could act without me. Now, there was only desperation, a raw, unpolished need that no one could hide. We need your help," he admitted, his words rushing out in a tangled mess. "Everything went wrong with the sale. The new owners are threatening legal action, contractors are demanding payment, and Mom and Dad, they don't know what to do." I listened quietly. For months, I had observed, reflected, and let my pain settle into wisdom. I had learned that when emotions run high, the world often shows its true shape. Their panic was not just about money or property, it was about respect. They had assumed I would remain silent, that my voice didn't matter. And now, finally, they were learning the weight of underestimating someone who had quietly grown stronger while they stumbled. I waited a beat before responding. Not with anger. Not with reproach. Just with one simple question, calm and deliberate. "Do we even know each other?" Silence. Long, heavy silence. I could hear the hesitation in his breathing, the pause as he processed the words. This was not a question meant to shame, but to draw a boundary, to assert that my trust and my time were not theirs to take lightly. He stammered, trying to explain, to justify, to plead, but I remained calm. I let him speak without interruption, simply absorbing the words, weighing them. I realized then that my family had acted out of convenience and assumption, not malice. Still, that didn't erase the betrayal, and it didn't give them license to assume I would fix everything. "I can guide you," I said finally, my voice steady, "but I won't be drawn into the chaos you created. You have to take responsibility for your choices, just as I have taken responsibility for mine." It was a gentle but firm line in the sand, and I could sense its effect immediately. Their tone shifted, a mixture of humility, fear, and reluctant respect. They understood, finally, that I was not the child who would silently accept exclusion. I was calm, capable, and unwavering, and they had underestimated me at their own peril. Over the next few days, I guided them where necessary, offering advice and solutions without taking on the burden of their mistakes. I watched as they navigated the consequences of their decisions, and I felt no satisfaction in their panic, only a quiet understanding that life often balances itself. Respect, patience, and wisdom had their own weight, and this was the lesson they were learning firsthand. By the end, the house issue was resolved. The crisis had passed. And yet, the most important change was not in the sale or the money, it was in the recognition of boundaries, of personal strength, and of dignity. My family had learned, without me raising my voice, that exclusion has consequences, that betrayal has echoes, and that calm, steady wisdom often holds more power than anger or drama. As I sat back in my apartment that night, watching the city lights shimmer like distant stars, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had been hurt. I had been dismissed. But I had remained true to myself. I had preserved my dignity, my voice, and my calm. And in that quiet, gentle way, I realized the truth of what I had learned: respect is earned, boundaries matter, and inner strength does not need to shout to be heard. The house was gone, but I had kept myself intact. And that was more than enough.